Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folari. Well, our guest this morning is a former DG of the Progressive Governors Forum and also former APC National Vice Chairman Northwest in the person of Alhaji Salihu Mohammed Lukman. Alhaji, thank you very much for making time for us today.
Thank you very much.
Indeed. Okay. Now, our subject of conversation this morning is sort of the, matters arising from the engagement between Labour and the federal government. All of that has been, most people are very happy with the fact that somehow there was this sort of cooperation, rapprochement. It wasn't a matter of all or nothing. And to that extent, I imagine people will give kudos to Labour as well as the federal government that was open to suggestions that were made by Labour. So we have this sort of engagement, which we have always, most people have always called for. But give me your view, if you will, of the matters that are arising from the engagement between NLC, TUC, and the federal government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yori. I think the first thing which I try to raise is to acknowledge President Asuwaju for the humility to reduce his pronouncement in the October 1 broadcast to proposals which were presented to Labour. And that being the case, I think the next commendation is also to Labour for seizing that opportunity to engage the issues and table additional proposal, which led to the new atmosphere that facilitated the agreement that was reached, which made it also possible for the NLC and TUC to withdraw the threat of the strike that should have commenced yesterday.
Indeed.
I think this provided a new template in terms of government-labor relations. And I think by my own reading of the situation, we need to focus more in terms of sustainability. This kind of template need to continue to guide the relationship between government and labor. And for that to be sustainable, I think first and foremost, we need to appreciate the factor of negotiation between government and labor has to be a constant issue. It's not only when there are disagreements that negotiation should happen. I think negotiation should be a constant issue. Right now, I can see, and which is a very positive thing, when the agreement was signed between government and labor, 1 month was given within which to ensure that implementation of what is agreed has started. And I think while that is important is that it pushed government to really sustain the current tempo of negotiation. Look, Mr. Yorim, I keep arguing the value of democracy is about negotiation. Remove negotiation out of democracy, you end up with the problem of lack of harmony between citizens and government. And that has been the bane of Nigeria over the years. And we need to start moving away from that. Why I consider the current template, the template that led to the agreement, as something that we must build on, is that it also gives the government of Asuwaju an opportunity to use that template to develop relationship with all interest groups in the country. Okay. It's not only labor. Okay. Even in the context of implementing the current agreement, for instance, the power of Asuwaju's government is more in terms of administering the agreement on federal employees. There are other layers of employees, state governments, local governments, and even private sector employees. how do we use this template to ensure that the agreement is expanded to cover all these sectors? And my first argument is that we need to use the template to begin to negotiate more substantive issues. Because what are the substantive issues? The substantive issues is not about administering current resources. The substantive issues is about creating conditions that will lead to the expansion of the revenue base of government and all employers of labor. Because at the end of the day, what does workers want? They want higher pay. Employers and government can only afford higher pay based on their earning capacity. Now, if you look at the budget, and this is my argument, if you look at the budget of Nigerian federal government, it's about 21 trillion naira, which translates to about $30 billion. Now, similar countries at the level of Nigeria's development are operating budget of over $200 billion. Now, you can argue by that Nigeria is only spending about 10% of its capacity. So the capacity of Nigeria's spending can be expanded tenfold, for instance. How do we use the current template of engagement between labor and government to be expanded to cover all employers so that there is a commitment in terms of what needs to be done to expand the revenue base of both government and all employers? And that will have to now lock in the issue of productivity. We cannot take all these things for granted. Ideally, negotiation in terms of increased earning of workers should find its bearing in terms of what workers are able to produce. Now, all this over the years, largely on account of some received wisdom that has come to dominate public conversation in Nigeria, we tend to imagine that government has all the resources. It's not true. Now we need, and this is why, as a government produced by a party envisioned to be progressive, these are the substantive issues. I say this all the time, and I am a proud member of APC, not because APC is developed to the point that it is doing all the right things, but it has the potential. We need to continue to engage our leaders. We need to continue to engage ourselves as citizens to get things right so that our democracy translates to becoming both representative and responsive to the interests of Nigerians. I think this will be my take on all the issues.
Indeed. And as you also pointed out, there is much promise for relations between labor and government not to be necessarily bellicose, because as you pointed out, what labor wants is what government also wants. Labor, of course, wants the best of conditions possible within the resources available for its workers. But the fact that government was also able to engage, they actually, following their conversation and engagement, they actually improved on an offer that they had made earlier. And all of this, of course, has to be paid for. But then it was a matter of, the important thing here is harmony within labor, because that harmony is going to be crucial, as you have also indicated by some of the things you said. It's going to be crucial when it comes to achieving our economic goals, because it's the workers that are going to really work the economy more than anything else. So people just have to be on board. And it seemed to me that most observers would think that government was leaning over backwards. It's not just, in fact, the whole attitude, the whole body language of government was more towards, unlike complaints that we'd had in the past that we weren't being listened to, they were simply forcing it down our throats. I think even labor is probably going to be better disposed, looking at what happened then, as we go forward, for some of the other tough things that they have asked for and that government has actually put out a statement on, that is going to have to be sourced one way or the other. So Labour is going to see that this government is a listening government. It is actually, on our side as much as we are. Of course, there will always be differences. Labour will want 100. Government will say, but it is that very 100 that we have. That is the only 100 that we have. Can we find a way to take some things out of that for some other things that you people will also want as well? So it just looks like, it seemed like the beginning of possibly a new era in government-labor relations, all other things being equal, because one has to keep one's fingers crossed once you're talking about labor and government, and hope that the party continues for a while.
I think apart from keeping fingers crossed, I think we need to also have the confidence, to believe that it is possible. Look, when I commended President Asuwaju, I was not just commending him because I'm APC and because I'm a supporter of his government. I'm commending him because this is about the first time a president is making a broadcast, putting things on the table in a manner that clearly suggests he was sensitive to the fact that we are on the eve of a strike, and he wanted to preempt it. But even after that, in most cases, such kind of pronouncement will only come after the strike has commenced, and the president will present it as a conclusive issue. Now, in this particular case, it appeared that after he made the broadcast, he gave directive to the government team to invite Labour to a meeting. And within the same day, on the 1st October, Labour was invited. And at the meeting, instead of the normal grandstanding that used to happen when president has spoken, to say, look, government has made all your demand, go back, there is no need for strike. That didn't appear to be what has happened. What has happened was that the issues contained in the president's speech became proposals. And Labour were allowed to engage it and criticize it, made additional, and that began to shift. If you remember, the first pronouncement that came was that the 25,000 naira was to be administered to junior federal employees. Now, immediately after the first level of negotiation, there was a report that the 25,000 will be administered to all category of employees in federal government, which must have been informed by the position of Labour. And it showed that the government, like you said, is truly a listening government and is really interested in ensuring that the strike threat is removed. Now, after even the agreement was announced, the Chief of Staff to the President, Right Honorable Femi Bajabiamila, came on air again to announce that government has reviewed the 25,000 upward to 35,000 naira, and it will be administered to all federal employees. I think this must have given the confidence to Labour to say, well, okay, government is really serious. So on the basis of this, we agree we'll go back to our constituency and report back, and hopefully the strike, and that was what happened. The strike was removed. Of course, now, I think the point that we must continue to emphasize is that this gives us the template. If truly we want to ensure harmony between government and organized labor, and by extension, even between government and citizens, there has to be this kind of atmosphere whereby government is able to sit down on the table with organized groups, without the normal arrogance of saying that, look, this is our position, we grandstand, and then the other group will now imagine that unless they go on strike or protest, government is not going to shift. We have seen from this that it's a simple courtesy of sitting on the table and having that listening ear that will enable all parties to strike an agreement. Of course, it does not mean when agreement is reached, everybody will be satisfied. There will still be room, but that is why, life is about constant dynamic factors, which will keep changing. But once that relationship is established, the negotiation will continue. Now, the point I must stress is that there are structures in Ministry of Labor that should have the responsibility to drive the process of managing this new relationship between government and labor.
Okay.
The danger always has been that after agreement, we fall back to business as usual, and until another problem emerges before we return. I think that shouldn't be the case. And this will require that some reform take place in Ministry of Labor. We must not assume, ideally, there should be skills in terms of managing processes of negotiation in Ministry of Labor. Now, there has to be some level of auditing in terms of the availability of those skills. If those skills are not readily available, then there has to be, as part of the reform, strategy to ensure that those skills are mobilized and made domicile in Ministry of Labor to drive the process. And there are many, for instance, to the best of my knowledge, ILO, for instance, International Labour Organization, one of their commitment, and there are so many bilateral agreements between Nigeria and ILO in terms of developing the capacity of Ministry of Labor. Now, government should take advantage of all those multilateral agreements and even the relationship with ILO to begin to now reposition Ministry of Labor to drive all these processes. So that, because my argument is that Labor must be able to, beyond sitting with federal government, to also separately sit with state governments and private employers to negotiate this thing based on the capacity of this level of government and based on a strategy to also strike an agreement about those things I call qualitative issues that will lead to the expansion of the revenue base and earning of this organization so that workers can be able to earn more. Now, why are we crying over increasing prices of fuel subsidy? Largely is because relative to the earning or income of citizens, the increase in prices have taken substantial part of it. But if there is a corresponding initiative to expand the revenue base of government and revenue base of employers, then earning of workers and citizens can also equally be expanded. I think this will be my stronger recommendation, Mr. Yuri.
Thank you very much, Alhaji Salihu. Mr. George, thank you for holding on. Good morning to you. Mr. George has called in from Lagos, wanting to contribute to the conversation.
Good morning, Uncle Yuri.
Good morning.
Good morning to your guest. Uncle Yuri, I don't have any issue with the negotiations or what transpired at that negotiation table. What I have issues with is the lack of sincerity of purpose by Labour. Why am I saying this?
Okay, why?
After all said and done at that meeting and the president's broadcast with all the negotiations and conclusions that followed, yesterday night I was watching the NLC president on television. A journalist was asking him, what are you going to do about governance in this issue of palliatives? What are you going to do to ensure that what the federal government allocated to the states is also appropriately used by the governors? The NLC president said that the governors have already done what is expected of them. That is to tell me that the NLC is really not about ensuring that the poor masses are reached, but it is just about pulling down the government. That's what I meant by sincerity.
Because I was wondering, Mr. George, what you meant.
Yes.
Well, thank you for explaining it, because in the release following that, there was an item there that the federal government, Labour was, impressing it on the federal government to urge state governments through the National Economic Council and Governors Forum to implement better all these things. So I'm surprised to...
The NLC president said no, that the state government or the state governors are already doing it. That is not how it is. Then secondly, on your issue, if you permit me, the test. I want to ask him a question.
Sure.
Why is it that he's always in disagreement with the leadership of his party? Every leadership that comes to the party, he disagrees, but he wouldn't leave the party. I want him to educate us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh. Okay, interesting one there. Alaji, you heard both questions.
Yeah, I heard both the two questions, and I'm going to respond this way. The first is that I think we must appeal to citizens on the issue of NLC. I think we need to be fair to also NLC. Their powers to direct governance is not there. They can only try to influence it based on how they are able to relate with governors at that level. And sometimes I think we are expecting too much. We can have our own position, our own judgment in terms of what governors are doing, but as much as possible, we must not expect everybody to agree with us. And I think the NLC president will be constrained because as far as his mandate is concerned, will be dictated based on decision of the organs of the NLC, not the sentiment out there in the public. And I think we need to appeal to citizens to recognize that. Now, on the second question, why am I disagreeing with my leaders, and I am not leaving the party? Well, first, let me say that my commitment to democracy is not based on agreement with what leaders are doing. It's based on a vision, and I keep making this point, I have been at the advocacy front before the formation of this party. We were very clear the kind of party it was supposed to have responded to the challenges that PDP has created in terms of emergence of leadership, in terms of what democracy should be all about. And it was well negotiated, and which is why we got the approval rating in 2015 to defeat the PDP. Now, why am I disagreeing with our leaders? I mean, I disagree with leaders largely because I believe they, in the first place, have the capacity to do the right thing. And I believe our leaders are also committed in terms of the development of this democracy. And sometimes supporting leaders is not about being sycophantic. I think my belief is that supporting leaders is also about telling them the hard truth so that they are able to wake up to the reality. It's not only when they are confronted with opposition out there. Now, you say I disagree with all leaders. I don't know your reference point. If your reference point is starting with the leadership of Comrade Adams, I can tell you that I have been together. Comrade Adams has been my mentor. I work with him in the trade union for more than 16 years. And our relationship has never been that of sycophantic. In fact, if there is anything that brings me closer to Comrade Adams, was the capacity to disagree, and we had those kind of relationship. Now, the truth is that, which I tell all our leaders, having criticized Comrade Adams, we got the caretaker committee. If the caretaker committee now failed to do the right thing and collapse below even the level where Comrade Adams was, it will be unfair on the part of somebody like me to just sit down and keep quiet, and that informed why even as an employee of governance with His Excellency Memala as the chairman of the caretaker committee, I could come out publicly and say, no, you are going outside your mandate, Now, after that, I found myself in the leadership of the party under Senator Abdullahi Adamu, So if he is also going below the standard of the caretaker committee and Comrade Adam, simply because I'm in the leadership of the party, I should then keep quiet. That will not be fair to Comrade Adams. That will not be fair to His Excellency Mimala. And I believe if the leadership of Dr. Abdullah Umar Ganduje is not doing the right thing now, it will not be fair to the previous leadership if people like us who were critical of those leadership decide to keep quiet. But more importantly, I think we should get it right. It's about the future of this country. And we should get it right. It's not about small thing about being appointed in government or being elected to serve in government. It's not about all of that. I'm very sure the caller who asked the question will have had children. Now, at our own old age now, we cannot guarantee a future for our children that they could come and compete and become part of the leadership of this country, then there is something fundamentally wrong. That is not what I found when I was growing up, and I think the minimum we can do with the small life we have now is to struggle to move this country closer to where it was when we were born, if not ahead of where it was, So this will be my response.
All right, then.
People can disagree with me, but it's my view, it's my belief, it's my conviction.
Well, thank you very much for indeed addressing that. Our guest is Salihu Mohammed Lukman, former DG Progressive Governors Forum, as well as a former APC National Vice Chairman in the Northwest. We'll take a break now. We'll be right back with the subject matter we're looking at is the federal government and Labor's re-engagement and matters arising therefrom. Stay with us, please. We'll be right back. Welcome back. And in case you're just joining us, our guest is Salihu Mohammed Lukman, a former APC National Vice Chair in the Northwest. And we're looking at, matters arising from the engagement between government and Labor. Now, also very important, you've touched on it already, is all parties committing, that was contained in government statement, all parties committing, especially government, government was putting out that all parties have committed to henceforth abide by the dictates of social dialogue in all, future engagements. And in this connection, let me bring up that government also said that it's committing to the provision of as announced by the president on his 1st August broadcast to providing funds for micro and small scale enterprises. Now, this is very important because you had also spoken earlier about some trust deficit as to sometimes Labor especially has always complained that we have an agreement with government, they don't deliver on those commitments that they gave. Well, here's the federal government now, and I think that's a sort of refreshing one, committing that, we will be engaged, we will be, committed to that. But before you go there, I think I have to bring in, is it Joshua, who I understand is on the phone?
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Joshua from Irewalide.
Yes, thanks, and greetings to your guest.
Okay.
I want to appreciate him so much. He's such a good communicator, and his points are very, very, very germane. I just have to put in my word. If not, he's hitting it right on the spot. I was yesterday that if the present government or any government is to communication is very important. Because the moment government is disconnected from the people, that government is going to fail, no matter how much they put into the system and all of that. So that I will link to your guest. I wish he is a communication minister. He's such a good communicator, and he's connecting with his words to everyone. So I want to encourage his party. This is an insider. You see, government should not sit back and expect things to speak for itself. they need to connect to the people. Like labor is a bridge between the people and the government. If labor is in a good position, as it were, and the people are able to connect through them to the government, everything will tend to work together. My only proposition to you, Uncle Yori, and your guest is this: my concern before now, and I'm hopeful that something will be done in that direction. This Labour, is it the same Labour Party of Peter Obi? If I don't know, I've been thinking this Labour Party and then Labour Obi. If it is the same Labour Party of Obi that is Labour NLC,
no,
then we.
Okay, please continue.
Hello, Uncle Yori.
Yeah, please continue.
Are they the same?
Yes.
Hello?
I'm sorry
Are they
that,
the same?
yeah. Have you landed?
Yeah, that Labour Party, is it the same as the political party?
Okay. All right then. Alhaji, would you like to take a stab at that?
Let me.
Nigeria Labour Congress and Labour Party, the political party, are they one and the same?
No, I think first I will want to say they are not the same, although it's public knowledge that during the election, NLC endorsed the candidature of Peter Obi. And NLC also created the Labour Party in 2002. I was privileged to be part of the leadership of NLC when all the activities leading to the formation of the Labour Party took place. But we must accept, or we must admit, that the Labour Party as it's constituted is a shadow of what the NLC envisioned in 2002. And to that extent, the NLC as constituted today has little or no influence on the Labour Party as it's constituted. It can be debated, but this is my reading of it from outside, but people inside NLC can verify or confirm some of the issues I have raised. Now, to come back to the point you were making before the intervention of the last caller about social dialogue.
Yes.
I think that is the way to go, and I'm happy it was reflected in the agreement. But I think this is where Ministry of Labor, and honestly, a lot is before the minister currently. He has to initiate a process, because we must not take social dialogue for granted, and we must not reduce it to some ceremonial meetings between government, employers, and the NLS and the labor unions. Social dialogue is more about engagement to now ensure that the interests of labor or the interests of the working people of Nigeria is being recognized and taken on board in terms of policy design and implementation of government. And to that extent, therefore, it's a technical issue. It requires some skill set, both on the part of the labor organization and on the part of employers' organization and on the part of government. Because social dialogue is about tripartism, which basically is about getting this good relationship between employers' organization, private employers' organization, government, and labor. Now, even in terms of government, sometimes decisions are taken or agreements are reached at national level that tend to take for granted the capacity of state government and local government, for instance, which result in a lot of the unexpected consequences of getting agreement not implemented at state levels. I think, and which is why I'm saying, labor must not make the mistake of proceeding to imagine after agreement with federal government, automatically it becomes binding on state government and state government can implement it. I think labor must disaggregate its engagement to the level of having separate engagement with this, with state governments, to ensure that, and also private employers.
Okay.
Now, it requires some level of good skills, good negotiation skills, on the part of labor and on the part of also government, which are always taken for granted. I think as part of investment in human capital in the country, there has to be conscious effort to invest in the capacity to develop the negotiation skills of the social partners, both government, labor, and private employers. That way, we will be able to get to a point where, for instance, negotiation, people don't run away. Because part of the problem now, I'm sure if labor say they want to meet with state government, many state government will be reluctant, largely because they don't want to be constrained by agreement which they cannot implement.
Okay, I beg, forgive me, I must interrupt now because Mazi Okorafor has patiently held on for quite a while. Thank you very much, Mazi Okorafor in Arochukwu.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, I guess. The labor issue. See, employer and employee, these are two entities. Now, labor and TVC, they are fighting for servants. Now, what happened to the private employees and private employers? That is another issue. Now, look at ASU issue. When ASU went on strike, labor kept quiet. They didn't intervene. Now, ASU is now looking for another climb down, asking for 8 months on unpaid money. Now, where are we heading to? Now, both labor and ASU and any employer and employee, they should know that strike does not pay anybody. At the end of the day, it is the masses, the commoners, the down-to-earth that are going to suffer. If you cut off the light, the masses that have just managed to have food in their refrigerators, what will happen? Those things will get bad. How will they go back? How will they come back? How will they bounce back? So that it doesn't pay. And even the students, I was expecting labor that they are fighting. They should also make sure about the federal government soft loan. I call this soft loan of 500,000. The labor should also carry the students along so that those students from different homes, they can also benefit. Labor should not go and be talking about their own employees, forgetting about this, which are that's the backbone of this country. Because in the educational sector, where you don't have qualified human beings, trained people, you are beating about the bush. Because education, anything you do, there are 3 major services in the whole world. 1, security, education, and health. Where you miss these 3 things, you have missed and you have failed woefully. There's no substitute. So that is why when labor is fighting, they should make sure that the students' issue are also carried along. Because you talk about money. Now, labor, are they still remembering about the agri sector? That the food is the main actor. Whatever you gather is to train your children and bring food on the table. Are they talking about that one? It's not a question of money. The other variables they should carry along. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Mazi. I wonder if it is relevant to your thinking process, Mazi, that the government statement also spoke about provisions, a government committing to making provisions for the micro and small-scale enterprises, as indeed the president has spoken about. But Alhaji, over to you.
Well, I think, like you said, a number of these things have already been addressed. And the question of distinction between employees of government and private sector employees, I think are also recognized. But more importantly, it's not correct to say that NLC kept quiet when ASU was on strike, because to the best of my knowledge, ASU is an affiliate of NLC. And they have good relationship. I will not be able to recollect whether there are any public statements, but being affiliate of NLC, they don't need to make public statement endorsing the strike. They can always give their support internally through the activities of organs of the NLC. Now, I think we should return back to the issues we are discussing, which is about repositioning Ministry of Labor to be able to drive the process of social dialogue in the country. And driving the process of social dialogue which is what I was arguing, has to do with capacity to mobilize skills, negotiation skills that should be domiciled in Ministry of Labor. And in addition to that, there has to be a strategy to also ensure that human capital development in the country integrate the whole challenge of developing the skills and capacity of both union leaders and employers to negotiate and reach agreement, and when there are disputes, what needs to be done. Because over time, and this is part of the consequences of hangover of military rule in this country, over time, process of dispute management and resolution in the country has become weak to the extent that you see clearly, structures like Industrial Arbitration Panel, National Industrial Court, which have statutory roles in terms of even administration of justice with respect to workplace and grievances management, have become weak. And we need to really strengthen those issues. And if, for instance, we are talking of expanding the revenue base of government and the revenue base of employees in the country, we must find a way to strengthen these institutions so that we are beginning to now minimize the incidences of strike. For instance, I have argued, and maybe that is one of the issues that made me to have a strong disagreement with the last Minister of Labor, Dr. Chris Ngige. I have argued that the ministry almost abdicated its responsibility in the face of strike by ASU, in the face of strike by resident doctors, instead of convening meetings to begin to, like it was done with respect to the last strike, meetings were convened before even the deadline. Now, in the case of, in the past, under the, when Dr. Chris Ngige was minister, we had situation where meetings were not convened until ultimatum expired and strike commences. Sometime it will be even 2 days after strike has commenced that a meeting will be convened. This is one of the things I have argued at the beginning. I think immediately President Asuwaju won the election, that moving forward, we must operate based on a strategy to say, well, this is the mandate of a minister. If the minister failed to deliver on that mandate, Asuwaju doesn't owe anybody a job. You should just fire the person and let's find people who can drive these processes. And I think, and I have confidence in the current minister, and I am hoping he will begin to really initiate the process of reform in the Ministry of Labor so that this new template that has emerged can be strengthened and it will become the working arrangement that facilitate relationship between government and the trade unions.
Indeed. One hopes so because, as you're well aware, a lot of President Tinubu's ideas are based on a reformist approach to governance, not just in what we're talking about now, but other aspects, all of which are concerned directly back to the health of the economy. And of course, workers themselves are fundamental in that. And as you say, there had been complaints in the past, and one just hopes that things will change with this. As you said, there's a lot that goes into it.
No, Mr. Yori, let's hit the nail on the head. Things have to change if the government of President Asuwaju has to renew the hope of Nigeria. For instance, it's a straightforward thing. Expanding the revenue base of government is about increased productivity of workers.
Yes.
There is no way you can achieve that without having some substantive agreement in terms of how even trade unions will help regulate the conduct of their employees. If, for instance, employees do anything, and when they are disciplined, trade unions will now step in to try to protect employees. you are not going to achieve that.
Indeed.
So there has to be some substantive agreement between employers and government and the trade unions in terms of the new kind of environment that should be created so that any worker who doesn't comply with the agreed expected conduct, no union should defend such a worker.
Indeed. I'm sure many people recognize that, as you said, one needs to hit the nail on the head. Many people would have been scandalized at the spectacle that was observed in the Ministry of Works. But as enough said about that, where there was a situation that was almost unbelievable, but things came. Thank you very much, Mr. Festus, calling in from Ikorodu.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Thank you for calling in.
Work.
Thank you very much for calling
Good morning
in.
to your guest, sir.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
my own is that I want to contribute to your program, sir.
Go ahead, please.
My contribution is that I'm appealing to the president. He is the father of the nation now. He should help us. Anything the labor is saying, you should listen to them. As the father of the nation, he is our father as we speak today. He should attend to our issues. We are crying. So anything that labor is talking to him for, he should also listen and assist us, because labor is talking about what is affecting the people. So we should not see it from angle of politics. We should not see it from angle of sentiment, because there's no separate market for any tribe or for any religion. Everybody goes to the same market. Hunger does not know tribe. Hunger does not know tribe religion.
Yes, but Festus,
hunger does not know.
Festus, thank you very much for calling in. Festus, do you relate to the fact that this increased productivity can only come from one place, and that is from workers, labor?
Yes, sir.
That when we have increased productivity, then a lot of things will be much more doable than they are now. So that was the point, sir, that our guests, touched upon, and that I also had also spoken about, as opposed to doing things the way they have been done for so long.
Yes.
You agree? There was a minister who was complaining that, people, he wants his people to be more productive. But labor came back. Well, when I say labor, a representative of labor was observed, and in a very surprising manner, saying that no, this is not how things have been done in the past. But so
the president should just be more mature than them. He's our father. Let him just say that. Yes.
Okay.
As a father, he's more mature than them.
All right. Okay, Mr. Festus, I want to thank you very much. We really appreciate your call. Well, that viewer was appealing.
I just hope. I'm sure if the president is not listening, people close to him are listening, and I'm sure he has a listening ear.
Yes.
But before I lose the point I wanted to conclude the last statement with is the issue. We have a National Productivity Center.
Yes.
And again, this is one center. It's under Ministry of Labor. It's one center that, as far as I'm concerned, is redundant. The only way you hear it, there's usually a productivity day. So it's only around marking that productivity day you hear activities of the National Productivity Center. I think as part of the reform process going on in Ministry of Labor, that center must be reformed, and it must have the capacity to guide, because it's more about data gathering, to guide the process of target setting within the employment organization, so that productivity targets are met or achievable targets are even set. So we need to really reorganize that National Productivity Center beyond what it is now.
Indeed.